The fastest way to waste 5 years. Have you ever looked back at the last 5 years and wondered, how did I work this hard and still end up so close to where I started? Not broke, not failing, just stuck. Same salary range, same stress, same feeling that you're capable of more. Because here's something uncomfortable. The fastest way to waste 5 years is not making bad decisions. It's making no clear decisions at all. And that's what we are talking about today. Because most people don't lose 5 years in one dramatic moment. They lose them quietly. One busy week at a time, one distraction at a time, one postponed decision at a time. And by the end of it, they've been active for years without actually moving forward. Now, before you think this is going to be another work harder speech, it's not. In fact, one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that hard work alone is not enough, because millions of people work hard, yet very few create meaningful financial progress. So what's the difference? Let's start with a scene from a movie. In Avengers Endgame, there's a moment where the heroes realize they have been fighting battle after battle. But the real solution requires completely different strategy. More effort wasn't the answer. Better direction was. And that's exactly what happens financially. Most professionals are fighting harder every year, working harder, learning more, consuming more information. Yet the results barely change, because effort without direction creates motion, not progress. Now, think about the average professional. Monday to Friday, work meetings, deadlines, commute, family responsibilities, weekend recovery, then repeat, year after year. From the outside, it looks productive. But here's the question. How much of that activity is actually building assets? Not income, assets. Because income pays today's bills, assets pay future bills. And confusing those two ideas is where most people lose years. Most people spend years improving income without spending enough time building assets. And that's a very expensive mistake, because income requires your continued participation. Assets continue producing value long after the work is done. Now, when people hear assets, they immediately think of huge investments, real estate, large businesses, massive portfolios. But assets can start much smaller. A skill that generates income, a side business, content that attracts opportunities, investments that compound, even a simple system that consistently creates additional cash flow. The size matters less than the direction. And this is where many professionals unknowingly waste many years. They become exceptional consumers of information, consumers of content, consumers of opportunities, but very little builders. Let me explain. Imagine two people spend the next 5 years differently. Person number one consumes books, podcasts, videos, courses, motivational content, business content, financial content. Every week, they learn something new. They feel productive, they feel informed, they feel prepared. Person number two learns too. But every piece of information immediately gets attached to action. Learning, building, learning, building, learning, building. 5 years later, one has knowledge, the other has assets. And that difference changes everything. This reminds me something from the Martian. Matt Damon's character survives because he focuses on solving one practical problem at a time. Not 50, not everything, just the next critical step. And that's how financial progress actually works. Not giant breakthroughs, small repeated construction. Which leads to a question most people avoid. What exactly are you building right now? Not what are you planning, not what are you researching, not what are you considering. What are you actually building? Because that's where reality lives. Most people have future goals. Few people have present systems. And systems are what creates results. A goal says, I want financial freedom. A system says, every Tuesday and Thursday, I spend 45 minutes building an income producing asset. One creates hope, the other creates progress. Now, here's something fascinating. The people who waste 5 years rarely notice it's happening because wasting time doesn't look like wasting time. It looks productive. Researching, planning, comparing, learning, thinking, preparing, all useful activities until they become substitutes for execution. And that's where the trap begins. You convince yourself that you're moving forward because you're staying busy. But busy and productive are not the same thing. In fact, some of the busiest people I know are making the slowest financial progress because they are reacting, not building. There's a huge difference. Reaction focuses on today's demands. Building focuses on tomorrow's opportunities. And if every day is consumed by reaction, 5 years disappear very quickly. Now, here's where financial education becomes important. Because financial education isn't really about money. It's about decisions. Better financial education creates better financial decisions. Better decisions create better systems. Better systems create better assets. And assets create freedom. That's why I always tell people, don't rush to learn how to make money. First, learn how money behaves. Because many people eventually earn more, but their financial position doesn't improve. Why? Because earning and managing are different skills. Making and keeping are different skills. Growing and protecting are different skills. Without financial education, every new level of income simply creates new levels of spending. And 5 years later, the cycle continues. Now, here's the good news. Avoiding this trap is simpler than most people think. Not easy, but simple. Ask yourself 3 questions. First, what am I building? Second, how often am I building it? And third, will this matter 5 years from now? Those 3 questions eliminate a surprising amount of distraction because suddenly you stop chasing every opportunity. You stop following every trend. You stop switching directions every month. Instead, you begin focusing on compounding. And compounding is one of the most misunderstood forces in personal finance. People think compounding only applies to money. It doesn't. Skills compound, relationships compound, reputation compounds, systems compound, consistency compounds. Everything valuable compounds. But only if you stay with it long enough. That's why the fastest way to waste 5 years is constant restarting. New strategy, new idea, new plan, new direction, again and again and again. Now, every restart feels exciting, but excitement often comes at the expense of momentum. Meanwhile, the people quietly making progress are doing something less exciting. They are continuing, they are improving, they are refining, they are staying with the process long enough for the results to emerge. And that's exactly where most breakthroughs come from. Not dramatic changes, sustained execution. Which brings me to something that sits at the center of everything I teach. Clarity, because clarity determines where your attention goes. Control determines how your resources are used. Consistency determines whether results compound. Those three things are more powerful than motivation, because motivation comes and goes, but systems remain. And when you have the right systems, 5 years become a powerful advantage. Without one, 5 years disappears surprisingly fast. So if there is one idea I want you to take from this video, it's this: don't measure the next 5 years by how hard you'll work. Measure them by what you'll build. Because the people who create extraordinary financial outcomes are rarely doing extraordinary things every day. They are doing ordinary things extraordinarily consistently. And 5 years later, the gap becomes impossible to ignore. That's the difference. Not talent, not luck, not even intelligence, direction. Because the fastest way to waste 5 years is to spend them moving without building. And the fastest way to change your future is to start building something that compounds today.